It's the end of the second chapter of the Scroll of Esther. $12.54. So Esther is now queen. And she's a mystery woman. She's kept her identity secret, and Achashverosh has tried in various ways to get her to reveal her identity, and she has refused to do so. Verse 21, at the bottom of the page. In those days, while Mordechai was sitting at the king's gate, which is said in the previous paragraph, that's what he would do, Bigsan and Seresh, two of the king's advisors, of the guardians of the threshold, became angry and plotted to lay hands on King Achashverosh, in other words, to assassinate him. The plot became known to Mordechai, who told it to Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordechai's name. The matter was investigated and corroborated, and they were both hanged on the gallows. It was written in the book of Chronicles in the king's presence. Now, at this point in the story, and for the next couple of chapters, this looks like just an arbitrary piece of information. Not clear what it has to do with the story. 6 chapters from now will be very important. And as you well know, people who are have authority and power, there are plots to assassinate them, and sometimes the plots are successful. In United States history, there's a number of them that were successful. On the other hand, I think the percentage of such plots that are successful is very small, because if it would be big, and there would be a lot of them, it would hardly pay to be a king. It would mean having a short life. How did Mordechai discover this when these are two high advisors of the king? The text doesn't give you a clue. The oral tradition preserves that Bigsan and Seresh was speaking in some foreign language, but Mordechai knew that language. And therefore, they felt that they could speak openly in front of him because nobody knows that language, and he knew the language. And it will also be very important later that Queen Esther told the king in the name of Mordechai, because that will play a role. So this is like planting a fact in the sequence of events as it happened, but its significance will come out later. Okay, chapter 3. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hamdasa, the Agagite. What's an Agagite? Some kind of precious gem, I guess, huh? No, there was a guy named Agag, and he was the king of the Amalekites. And when Saul attacked them, at God's word, and was told to annihilate the whole people, he did, except for the king. What he was going to do with the king afterwards, not 100% clear, but he didn't assassinate him. And the night before the next day in which Samuel the prophet killed him, he impregnated a woman, and therefore that was a continuation of his line and of the Amalekite line. Otherwise, the whole of the Amalekite line would have been wiped out. Saul would have succeeded in ending that chapter of Jewish history. And Haman is a descendant of Agag. Now you remember that in chapter 1, it says that Mordechai was from the tribe of Binyamin. So already you have now set up, in terms of their ancestry, there's a historical precedent for a feud here. And that's part of the background that the book wants you to know. And it's also important, I'm just reading the moral on these things now, that we'll keep this in mind. Haman's power wasn't his own. Haman was put in place of power by Achashverosh. So when you see the challenge of Haman, it doesn't stand on its own two legs. It's Haman and after all, how does he write out the decrees? The king says, take my signet ring and seal the decrees with my ring. So it's definitely a kind of partnership here. The two of them are working together. So with all of the correct bad feeling about Haman, we have to keep in mind that it's not him alone that's the enemy here. So he advanced him. He set his seat above all the officers who were with him. He made him what we call the prime minister. Prime means first in the rank. All the king's servants at the king's gate would bow down and prostrate themselves before Haman, for this is what the king had commanded concerning him. Now, first of all, just a little background. People think of prostrating yourself in front of an idol, which definitely was done. And then they associate prostrating oneself with idol worship and so forth and so on. But that's not a necessary association. Indeed, when Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, comes to Moses in the wilderness, Moses goes out to greet him, and Moses prostrates himself to his father-in-law. So it's a way of showing profound respect, but has absolutely nothing to do with the one to whom the prostration is being directed, is being taken as a god or being worshipped in any way. And here the verses say that this was a law of the king. There is an opinion in the oral tradition that either Haman deified himself or Haman wore an idol around his neck, and there is a position that it was just a political rule. Rabbi Esther has a whole essay, which we will go through in Yis Hashem, where he took it just as a political rule. So as far as the verses are concerned, we're dealing here now with a command of the king. So, you can imagine the square in front of the palace, and there's people who are occupied doing various things there, and the Haman comes strolling through as prime minister to go to the palace, bang, everybody's down on the ground. But Mordechai would not bow nor prostrate himself. Well, that's really a public disobedience of the king's decree. Can't be more public than that. It's in the square before the palace. Everybody's going down. Only one person standing. I wonder who that is. Oh, look at that. It's Mordechai. Watch how this is handled. You'll see what I told you 2 days ago about the insecurity of the king and the way he needs to curry favor with the people. Okay, so the king's servants at the king's gate said to Mordechai, why do you disobey the king's command? They don't shoot him on the spot. Imagine someone did that to Putin. He'd be dead instantly, right? No! Ask the man. Maybe he has an explanation, you know. Don't just kill him on the spot for publicly disobeying the king's decree. Finally, when it said this to him day after day, and he did not heed them, day after day. Wow. They don't get an answer, so they don't kill him? They told Haman to see whether Mordechai's words would avail, for he had told them that he was a Jew. Now, this is a very elliptical sentence. At a certain point in this interaction, he told them he was a Jew. So what does Mordechai mean? So he's a Jew. So what? Maybe there's something in the Jewish religion that forbids him to prostrate himself to Haman. If that's true, it's okay. There's a conscientious objector's exemption from the decree. If you have some conscientious rule of your culture and values that you can't bow down, it's okay. The king said to bow down, but it's all right. You don't have to. What kind of king is that? What kind of emperor is that? to allow cultural exemptions to his decrees? Yeah, that's how he runs his kingdom, right? Okay. But now, they waited to see whether Mordechai's statement to them that he's a Jew is really right. Not maybe he's not Jewish, but is that really the explanation for why he's not bowing down or not? Is it a religious rule of Judaism not to bow down to foreign powers or who knows what? Or maybe, according to those who say that he deified himself or wore an idol around his neck, maybe that's what it is. He wouldn't bow down to someone who was associated with other deities. Let's see if it's true. They're waiting to see whether it's true or not. Okay. When Haman himself saw that Mordechai did not bow down or prostrate himself before him, that Haman was filled with rage. Aha. So Haman didn't notice this at first. I mean, Haman's walking through the square with his nose in the air, with his eyes half closed. You're peasants. You're mice. You're nothing. I'm the true man. Does he notice who bows and doesn't bow? The king said everybody has to bow. Everybody has to bow. Then came an occasion when he noticed that Mordechai's not bowing. How did that happen? It happened because Haman passed very close to Mordechai. And then you're passing within, let's say, 6 feet of somebody, and everybody's bowing down, and he isn't bowing down. Oh, look at that. Mordechai's not bowing down. So Haman gets angry. But what did the king's servants say? The king's servants say this. If there's something in principle here about not bowing down to Haman, to an idol, to someone with an idol around his neck, or whatever it is, then when Haman comes close to Mordechai, and the bowing is only respect, just like Moses bowed to his father-in-law, it's just respect, then he'll bow down. Because then it's not a question of his deity or anything else, just showing respect to a great person. But Mordechai doesn't bow down even when he passes within 6 feet of him. So the onlookers, the king's servants say, so he's lying. It's not his religion. His religion wouldn't prevent him from doing that. He's corrupt. He's a liar. That's what conclusion that they draw about Mordechai. But they don't kill him. It's quite strange, hey? Quite strange. How does he get away with this? Because the king is cautious. Because he doesn't want to rock the boat. Doesn't want to take chances. And Mordechai survives at this point. So now, Haman is filled with rage. You could imagine someone like him who's become the prime minister, and everyone's about that. This one guy isn't bowing down. However, it seemed contemptible to him to lay hands on Mordechai alone, for they had made known to him the people of Mordechai. This is what I said before about the position of the Jews in this empire. For Haman to take revenge on Mordechai, which he could do, he's prime minister, would look contemptible. Let me give you an example of what this means. I had a friend when I was, about 300 years ago when I was young, and he had a problem. He was in a school. He lived in a city where the intellectual level of the people in the city was pretty low, and the children was pretty low. And he went to public school, and it was on a very low level, and he was an intellectual. He was very bright, he was intellectual. And he caught a lot of social flack for that. People made fun of him and took advantage of him, and he was rejected socially, and it was hard. So I asked him, I met him later in his 20s, I said to him, how did you manage it? So he said, I'll tell you how I managed it. Someone would criticize me or make fun of me. First I would ask myself, is he responding to something true? Is the thing he's making fun of me for something, a quality that I really have, and it's not an appropriate quality, that I would try to take that to heart and try to change. But if it wasn't, then I said to myself, he's a dog barking. Just a dog barking, that's all. Would you be disturbed, irritated, unnerved, embarrassed by a dog barking at you? Not really, it's only a dog. Right? So, if you responded to such a person, it would mean you're giving him more importance in your own eyes than he deserves. Here, I think this is the spirit of Haman. And if Haman takes revenge against a Jew, why did you notice him? Why did it matter to you? They're scattered, they're disconnected, they're conquered people. A Jew that didn't respect you, so what? That was his feeling about taking revenge against Mordechai. So here you can imagine he's burning with rage. Even so, he's burning with rage. But socially, he can't take revenge. So Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the entire kingdom of Achashverosh, the people of Mordechai. I'll get him, and it won't look contemptible. Going after a whole nation isn't a small job. Prime ministers are in charge of things like that. And a prime minister might have a reason for going after the nation as a whole. So therefore, he thought he would avoid the charge of contempt. And if you think, boy, oh boy, it's pretty extravagant to say, I hate one person, I'm taking revenge on him, so I'm going to kill out his whole nation in order to avoid the contempt of going after one. You're right, it is extravagant, it is extreme, but you'll see he does it again later on in the book. This was the kind of character that he had. Yeah.
You kind of answered what I was going to ask, but I just want to clarify. He did want to go after the Jews just because of this personal vendetta against Mordechai? Like he was that much of an insecure kind of...
Well, you're asking it in a very subtle way. The question is whether his going after the Jews was just an excuse to get back at Mordechai.
Yeah, or whatever. His Jew hatred is just spawned from Mordechai's...
That's what the verses say. That's what the verses say.
Okay.
The verses say he wanted to kill Mordechai, but it would seem contemptible. He'd be made fun of by the intelligentsia, the people in power. So he went after the people so he could kill Mordechai, but he could kill him with an excuse. So, now, how does he carry out his plan? Well, the first thing he does is, in the first month, was the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of Achashverosh, the year of Achashverosh. So as we said, right, there was the third year, and then she went in the 7th year, and this is now the 12th year. So another 5 years went by. 12th year of King Achashverosh, Pur, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman from day to day, from month to month, to the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Well, there's a lot hidden here. First of all, they cast lots. There was a lot for the months and a lot for the days, and it came out to be the 14th of Adar. Now, why would you write a book in Hebrew and then put in a Persian word, pur, and then say to the reader, oh, I understand, it's a book in Hebrew, and you're a Hebrew reader, so you probably don't know what the Persian word means, so I'll tell you what the word means. It means lot, or goral in Hebrew. Why would you do that? Why not just say lot in Hebrew? Write it like all the other words in the book. And come to think of it, since pur is a Persian word, how is it that the Persian word for lot becomes the name of the holiday, Purim, which is a mixed word because it's a Persian word with a Hebrew ending, right? It's very weird, no? That has to have some explanation. I mean, on the surface, what's being said is there is such a thing as casting lots in the Persian culture, and they have a certain conception of what they're doing, but they're wrong. That's not what it really is. And it's really what the Jewish culture calls lots. And that's the underlying reality. And that's why it's not just enough to say that they cast lots, Gottleib. Because you wouldn't get the message that there are two different conceptual systems working here. And when Haman cast lots, he didn't cast them in the spirit in which we cast them, he cast them in the spirit in which the Persians cast them. Now, again, let's review. When did the casting of the lots take place? In the month of Nisan. That's the first month of the year, in the Hebrew months. And it ended up in the 12th month. What a bitter disappointment, hey? He's got to wait 11 months for his revenge. But he took comfort, the oral tradition tells us, from the fact that Moses died in the month of Adar. So he said, aha, I can already see why the lots picked out that month. That month is bad for Jews because the great leader of the Jews died in that month. So fine, good, I'm happy. He's waiting for his ability to carry it out in Adar. But the fact that there are 11 months between when he casts the lots and, on the other hand, when it's supposed to take place, will play a role in the scenario. Question? No. Okay. Fine. Now, Haman can't destroy a nation. He's the prime minister of the king. So he's got to somehow put it to the king. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed. That sounds like the same thing twice. In the Hebrew, it carries the implication, not only are they physically, geographically scattered, but socially and ideologically they're scattered. They're not of one mind. There are certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your realm. Their laws are different from every other people's. They do not observe even the king's laws. Therefore, it is not befitting for the king to tolerate them. Now, you're trying to convince somebody to do something. You use reasons that are meaningful to him. Look at the order of subjects here. First of all, they're scattered and dispersed and disunified. Second of all, their laws are different from other people's laws. Third, number 3 on the list is they don't keep your laws. Golly, shouldn't that have been number 1? Hey, this is the king. They're disobeying your laws. Maybe that should have been enough. They're systematically disobeying your laws. Get rid of them. What do the other 2 features have to contribute to the project, and why should they go first? Now, given what I've told you, can you figure it out?
It makes them look like nothing people, like they're not even worth, like it lowers the standing of the people. It makes them easier targets.
They're easier targets, number 1, right. And what else? What's the idea of their laws are different from the other people's laws?
So need them.
They have no allies. They have no allies. So and third of all, they're not unified among themselves, so unified opposition to you is going to be hard for them to achieve. Who's he talking to? Achashverosh, the fearful. Achashverosh, the worried. Number 1, what's going to happen to my reputation in the rest of the kingdom? Don't worry. They have no allies. Nobody cares about them. And what kind of resistance they're going to have? The resistance is trivial. That all is background to, and now when I tell you that they disobey your laws, you can go after them without fear. It's very striking. He puts this first. You would have expected him to say, they disobey your laws, so they're a problem. But you might feel that there's difficulty in attacking them, so here are the mitigating circumstances. He starts with the mitigating circumstances. He knows exactly who he's talking to. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to play devil's advocate, but is it possible that it's not such a deep reason that oftentimes, like, rule of 3, we'll say 3 things, and we'll crescendo to the third one, and we'll say the last one, we'll save the best for last so that it sticks, right? You always remember what you say last, right? If you want the king to...
Yeah, but these are not 3 things to be done. These are 3 reasons to do one thing.
But if I said to you, like, oh, you have a flat tire,
yep.
I might say, like, well, you can't drive. A new tire is $100. It's going to be annoying to change this tire. Some people might say it the other order because you just say, you can't drive. That's the last thing they want you to remember.
Right, but you're now giving me reasons that might stand in my way. It's very expensive. Oh, it's going to be hard, so on and so on. He's giving reasons that support doing what he wants him to do. These are not obstacles standing in his way. On the contrary, these are considerations which make it easier for him to do what Haman wants him to do. Right? There are reasons in favor.
Okay.
And there's another illustration of this, the weakness of Ahasuerus. So he says in verse 9, if it pleases the king, let it be recorded that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 silver talents into the hands of those who perform the duties for deposit in the king's treasuries. Now, let's see, given what we said 2 days ago, was that a good move or a bad move? How did we explain the party? What was the most important impact of the party that the verses spend the most time describing?
Displaying his wealth.
Displaying his wealth. Why did he want to display his wealth? How did I explain that?
To give the illusion of power.
The illusion of power and the illusion of?
Trust?
Almost, yes. A feature that...
He's not in someone else's back pocket.
That's right, independence. I'm independent. I don't owe anybody any money. When I have projects, I can pay for them myself. I'm not dependent upon somebody else's support. In political matters, if someone in authority depends upon someone else for support, then what he does as an authority is largely determined by those who are going to support him. But he doesn't need that. No. And here, Haman's offering him a bribe. That's precisely what he doesn't want to happen. He doesn't want to be bribed. He doesn't want anybody to know that he was bribed. That's precise. And that's why, in the next few verses, the king is going to refuse the money. So this, Haman got wrong. This he wasn't so smart about. Unless he planned that the king should refuse it, and that should be, there's something, you could do something very, very deep and subtle. If you want somebody to do something for you, here's one way to achieve it. You really wanted to do A, and you say to him, please do for me A and B. And you know that he's sort of irritated and he wants to show his independence. And, well, B? No, for sure not. Okay, but I'll do A. So he's shown that he can say no. He's shown that he's in charge, right? Okay. You only wanted A in the first place. You didn't care about B. But you put that, you see that with Pharaoh when Moses comes to him, and each time he says, yeah, you can go, but don't go exactly like you said, do it in the land of Egypt. No, you can't do it. Okay, you have to go outside, but don't go too far away. So that he can be still in authority, empowered for a little bit. Because a little bit, he's still controlling the situation. Each time he tries to put in that little bit. So it could be that Haman is saying, I'm going to ask him to destroy the people. I'm going to ask him to give a bribe. And to allow his ego to express itself, he'll say no to the bribe. Yeah, okay, fine. And he'll say yes to destroying the people. And then, he'll be satisfied. He was king. He said no, and I'll get what I want. Haman, I don't think, cared about the bribe one way or the other. So either he made a mistake or he had stuff like that in mind, but it has to be taken into account the king is not bribable. That's because that was a key point in his just demonstrating it to the people that he's beyond being bribed. Okay, so now verse 10, that was the appeal that Haman made. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hamdas, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Then the king said to Haman, the silver is given to you, the money I'm giving back to you. The people also to do with as you see fit. Now this is a very clever move in politics, and even in modern times, there's an application of it as well. When the decree comes out, how does it look? Well, there's a decree, and there's the king's signature on the decree. So it's definitely the king's decree. Yeah, it is the king's decree in terms of its authority, but the king didn't write it. And later, if it doesn't work out, the king could always say, oh, it wasn't me, it was the other guy. If it goes well, it was the king's decree, and it worked well, and the king is terrific. If it doesn't go well, so then he can say, it wasn't me. I remember there was a president of the United States who used to let his Secretary of State make statements of policy. And then he would see what did the papers write, and what other people say. And if it was bad, he would say, well, Secretary of State said it, but I didn't tell him to say that. And the people in the end knew the game, but the idea was that he could test policy without taking his own statement, because then if he changes his mind, he looks like he's a person who changes his mind. That's not so good. So it's a way in which you use a middleman for that kind of thing.
I thought the whole point of the second decree that we see later on was because this one couldn't be backed out of. But this seems like because the king didn't do it directly, it has some more leniency.
Well, couldn't be backed out of.
Like they couldn't
I know you're referring to the idea of 2 decrees, which I will get to, Amir Hashem, when we didn't get to it yet. Let me see if I can understand. Maybe I caused an association that I didn't mean. I was talking about the general procedure of sometimes the king taking off I didn't say it was going to work in this case.
Okay.
But that was a general procedure. For example, Jews often in medieval times were tax collectors. Why? Well, the king is the one behind the taxes. He's going to get all the money. But the Jew comes knocking at the door. Taxes, give it to me. So who gets the public anger? The Jew gets the public anger. Not to mention the fact that there were tax collectors even in ancient times who kept a percentage for themselves. That's another story. So then the king uses the Jew as the in-between. And Pharaoh used Joseph as the in-between. Whatever Pharaoh Joseph tells you to do. And when they ran out of food, he said, go to Joseph. He's the one who's running this show. If it's a disaster, it's Joseph's fault. Right? And if it's a success, then I'm the king and he's serving me, so it's my success.
But
So
it's less authority.
not less. There's such a thing as delegated authority. If the king appoints someone governor of the province, it isn't that the king has less authority. He's delegated certain, right?
But just saying that the delegated authority is not lesser than the. Obviously, well, I guess.
It's tricky, right?
I'm trying to figure out why they needed the second decree then if Haman.
No, because the content of the 2 decrees were entirely different. We'll get to that. We see what the decrees are. We'll get to today in that. Okay, so he gives him carte blanche, a free ticket. He can do whatever he wants, and the money belongs to him. Leave me out of it. Just do whatever you like. So, verse 12. The king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. Well, that's still Nisan, the first month. So we're not sure which day he was that he cast the lots, but this is now the 13th day when he writes out so it was a few days before that. And everything was written exactly as Haman dictated to the king's satraps. What's a satrap? He's an officer responsible to the king who runs local affairs. To the governors of each province, officials of every people, each province has its own script, each people has its own language. Okay, so there's no problem. When you get a local decree, there's no problem of translation. It's already been translated for you. And the king has professional translators who know how to translate his words into that language to say what the king wants it to say, which is very useful in a big kingdom. In King Ahasuerus' name was written and was sealed with the king's signet ring. I, the king, say X, Y, Z. Letter sent with a courier to all the king's provinces. Now, to destroy, to slay, and to exterminate all Jews, young and old, children and women, in a single day. 13th day of the 12th month, I made a mistake before I said the 14th, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. Now, here's a formula which leaves absolutely no ambiguity whatsoever. This means they are going to be dead. When we went through the Shemona Esrei, I pointed out that our prayer, where we ask that the informers and other villains be responded to by divine providence, the content of that prayer specifically avoids this language. Even though this language was in the possession of the rabbis at that time, when they made the prayer, they avoided this language because we're not asking for the destruction of our enemies. We're asking that they should be powerless. And if you look at the words there, it's quite clear that that's what the goal is. But here's a formula which is absolutely unambiguous, to actually destroy them, and to plunder their possessions. Now, in a certain sense, I think it's pretty obvious. You're going after a whole bunch of people, and they're going to kill all of them. There are no inheritors, to get it. I think that putting it into the decree is to sweeten the pot. When you go after the Jews, you can keep what you get. And no question that in the Second World War that happened, to the extent that unbelievable tragedy that after the Second World War, people who survived and went back to reclaim their possessions were killed. Because the non-Jews who saw them coming back realized why they're coming back, and they killed them. So that after having survived the war, they were killed when they came to reclaim their possessions. It's like the evil is, without bounds. Now, here's the thing that was mentioned before, and here the language is difficult. It says the copies of the document. Well, in the Hebrew, if it is Hebrew, pas shegen haksav. Pas shegen is not a Hebrew word, and it's not clear exactly what it means. The copies or the some elements of the document were to be promulgated in every province and published to all peoples, that they should be ready for that day. So, this, when he said it, went out with couriers in everyone's script, in everyone's language, to be distributed throughout the empire, there was an announcement that, like we have advertisements today, January 7th is a special day. Okay, they put that up, January 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th. By the time the 7th goes by, everybody's looking. Okay, what's going to happen? Right? They catch your attention with the first advertisement, and the second advertisement everybody looks at. Here, the 13th of Adar is going to be terrific. But that's all. What was public, and I'll show you why we have to say this. What was public was just that content. The 13th of Adar, 11 months from now, is going to be a very special day. Be ready. Couriers went forth hurriedly by the order of the king. The edict was distributed in Shushan, the capital. The king and Haman sat down to drink. So what? And the city of Shushan was bewildered. Now that's very important. Bewildered, just bewildered. What is this about? As I mentioned before, when you live in the capital city, rumors get around. People know. They're going to tell, because they're underground communications and so forth and so on. Here, nobody knew anything. Nobody knew anything. Because it was just between the king and Haman and the people who wrote it up. But they're just bewildered. And then the next, in chapter 4, Mordechai learned of all that had been done, and Mordechai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. Now this is a real puzzle. Everybody saw the decrees on the walls. Everybody saw the wall posters. Be ready for the 13th of Adar. But that's all it said. Therefore they were bewildered. Mordechai wasn't bewildered. He was devastated because he learned all that had been done. He learned that actually Haman Achashverosh decreed the destruction of the Jewish people for that day. So he puts on sackcloth and ashes, started running through the streets, crying and screaming. Well, how did that happen? If there was one decree, and then one decree contained all the information, and all that information went up on the wall posters everywhere, then the whole city of Shushan would have known immediately what it was about. They wouldn't have been bewildered. They would also have taken the sackcloth and ashes and going screaming through the streets. No, the only person who knew about it was Mordechai. How is that possible if it's in the public decree? Answer, it wasn't in the public decree. There were two documents. One document was put up on the wall posters. The 13th of Adar is going to be special. And then there were secret documents sent out to the local authorities explaining what's going to happen on the 13th, but they were secret. How did Mordechai find out the truth? I don't know. But this explains how it could be possible that when the wall posters went up, and the city of Shushan means the Jews basically, but everybody also, well, what's that all about? Was only bewildered, and only Mordechai knew, and then he could alert the Jews to what it was.
So in terms of the first and second, based on such destruction, the general idea is that the Jews were at a low level or kind of like deserved it. Was this time Jews intermarrying and worshipping idols?
The Gemara and the Midrash asked this question, and there's a whole long discussion of it, and maybe if we have time, if I'm finish the book, I'll tell you what the Maharal says about it. But you're asking a very was it the dialogue between, I think it was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his students. And the dialogue goes like this. The students say to him, what did the Jews, how did the Jews deserve to be destroyed in the times of Haman? That's what they asked Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says back to them, you say, you give an explanation. And they say, well, when Achashverosh had that festival, and I told you it was celebrating the failure of Jewish prophecy, and I asked you then, how could a Jew go and attend that? Right? So they said that was a failure. The failure was that. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says back to them, but look, this decree of Haman is against all the Jews in the entire kingdom. Who is it that participated in the feast of Achashverosh? It was the people in Shushan. It was only for the people in Shushan. The last week, anyway. And with the Jews who were involved, only the Jews in Shushan. Why would the failure of the Jews in Shushan be the one thing that triggers a decree of annihilation against the whole Jewish people? So they say to him, okay, we hear you, you say. And he says, because decades ago, the Jews bowed down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And the Maharal says that it wasn't one statue, there were lots of statues. They answered their own question. Right? There were lots of statues in lots of places, and people bowed down to it, and they bowed down to it also. Now, you could say, in the spirit of the back and forth, but they're all dead. These are only their grandchildren. So why would the decree, and if it's because of that, why wasn't the decree made when that happened? Why should it be made 2 generations later? So there's a lot of mystery in that statement of Chazal. But you see them asking your question. In other words, what was the problem here? And yes, Hashem, again, that also, when we get to the end of the book, we'll talk about how to understand that. Maharal has a very, very subtle and philosophical way of understanding the back and forth of that in that midrash. Yeah.
Is Mordechai a prophet?
No. Why do you ask?
Because that might be a way of how we figured out the...
Okay, I have to tell you that the word prophet in our vocabulary is a specialized legal term. There are different levels of divine inspiration, short of prophecy, by which a person could be informed of something, even though he's not a prophet. So asking whether he's a prophet doesn't close that door. But could have been one of the scribes who wrote it down and once or translated it into other languages. They knew. So there was someone in the bureaucratic class who knew. And maybe one of them told it. Maybe it could be. It's not impossible. Yeah.
Following up on Yehuda's question, is there generally like a big focus on if some of the great tragedies in Judaism have like we had it coming?
That's a good question. No. The idea of justice applies to the Jewish people as a whole. I think it's the Ramban who points out in the Shema, the first paragraph of the Shema is in the singular. And the second paragraph of the Shema is in the plural, when the Torah addresses the Jewish people. The first paragraph is in the singular, the second paragraph in the plural. And that goes hand in hand with the fact that in the first paragraph, there's no reward and punishment. First paragraph just tells you what you need to do. The second paragraph, it says, if you follow all the laws of the Torah, then things will go well for you. And if you violate the laws of the Torah, things will go badly for you. And that's said in the plural. The idea is that a visible correspondence between what you do and how you're treated is promised for the nation as a whole, but it's not promised for the individual.
So we are collectively punished.
Yes, but that's not the same as what you said before. Collective punishment refers to the fact that a whole population of people may be punished for something when even some of the population isn't guilty. That's called collective punishment.
But isn't that
It's included, it's implied by what I said before, but that wasn't the subject of what we said before.
Oh, okay.
What we said the subject before was just, will there be a correspondence between what X does and how X is treated? Yes, there'll be a correspondence for the general people, but not for the nation as a whole, but not for the individuals.
So is it a pretty accepted view that a lot of the Jewry of Europe had like degenerated before the Holocaust?
This is a big, big question, and there are people who have written about it, and there definitely is such a view. There definitely such a view. Rabbi Victor Miller wrote that, and he wrote it in a book which he didn't allow to be published while he was alive, because he knew it was going to stir a certain amount of controversy. I heard it from Rabbi Meiselman, same thing. So there definitely is a very responsible view, and it's quite difficult, I think, to take any other view, because we don't have any resources for explaining the divine providence for the group other than that. Yes? Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. So, Mordechai learned all that had been done. Mordechai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes. He went out to the midst of the city and cried loudly and bitterly. He came until the front of the king's gate. Usually he would be sitting in the gate. We would say in colloquial English, the gateway. The gate could be 10 meters long. That's all the gate. He sat in the gateway, usually, but now he can't do that, because it's forbidden to enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, wherever the king's command and his decree extended, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and wailing, most of them lying in sackcloth and ashes. And here you have to say that once Mordechai knew, and the Jews in Shushan knew, the Jews in Shushan sent out messengers to their brethren elsewhere. Otherwise, the way we've explained it, putting up on the wall the 13th of Adar is going to be special would not cause the Jews in distant places to put on sackcloth and ashes. They would have to know what it's about. And of course, their knowing what it's about, I'm sure they kept it to themselves. Then go to the Gentile neighbors and say, gee, in 10 months you're going to have a good time by killing all of us. I'm sure it didn't get out. Yeah.
Is there a correlation between all the times that Amalek is attacked? I mean, like Egypt, you have them over by the base of Mikdash, and over here by Purim, and also by the Nazis are, I've heard is a correlation.
If you identify the Nazis as Amalek, which isn't simple, though some people want to do it. That's a very nice question. That's a question that's the way Jews think about things. Is there any pattern? The very first one, it says because Rafu Yudeim and Torah, they were not solidly involved in what they should have been doing. So it was like it came to them because of their own failure. And of course that would be a general, but you're talking about Amalek specifically. We had other enemies who attacked us. Jesus, a lot of material in the Maharal about the four kingdoms, but Amalek is not one of the four kingdoms under whom we suffered. Although Amalek could be associated in some way with Rome, because Rome is Esau and Amalek is Esau's grandson, so maybe there's an association there. I don't know. It's a very good question to ask. Ask other people. I would be very interested to hear whether there's any theme in the times that Amalek attacks. It's a very good question. Yeah.
Would it? I guess it would have been embarrassing at the time to be wearing sackcloth without just like rags. Is it like a bag? I don't know.
Well, if you had a loss, let's say you were mourning for someone, and you put that on, it wouldn't be embarrassing. It would be completely appropriate to commemorate or to acknowledge the loss in that way. But that's what, and it seemed to be widespread because when Yonah came to Nineveh and told them they're going to be destroyed, they put on sackcloth and ashes. They even put it on the animals. That was part of their tshuva that they did. So apparently it was a widespread custom. What it means exactly, I don't know. I never studied it. Okay, so Sunday and Monday will be Q&A, as it usually is, and then Tuesday we'll get back to the text.